Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Christina, and we are the Connected in Glass podcast.
Every week, we will feature interviews with glass artists who speak to their creative processes and overcoming challenges.
These conversations are real and raw. We hope that by sharing these stories, you're able to find some connection and know that you're not alone. We just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to our podcast. We're super passionate about this project and work for hours every week to bring you this content. So if you'd like to help support us, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/connectedinglass. Also, please consider joining our Facebook group, Connected in Glass Community, where we continue the conversations from these episodes. We'd love to hear from you. This episode of Connected in Glass is sponsored by Diddy Clips. Diddy Clips has changed the way we film our glassblowing videos, and we're proud to be working with them. Today, we're interviewing Chris from Skoeetglass. He's a glass artist currently based in Colorado who's been working with glass since 2008.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Great. So excited to have you join us.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's skip the glass part of your life for just a moment. Tell us a little bit about where you live, what you enjoy besides glass, and then get us into your story of how you started working with glass.
Well, like she said, I'm out of Colorado. I live in Colorado Springs, probably the most expensive city in the country right now. Outside of glass, I mean, my life's pretty much just art. I've been a graffiti writer since I was in middle school. Ever since I could hold a pen or a pencil, I've been drawing. I mean, those are like probably my first memories is coloring, drawing, and making something.
And then how'd you get into working with glass?
Oh, and into glass. I actually had a local shop that they made vaporizer parts. They had a head shop, so I'd go and hang out in the head shop, and I'd buy pipes, and they saw me so much that they just kind of asked me if I wanted a job, and started working in the glass shop, in the head shop, as the clerk. And then eventually they let me start working on glass. They let me get on a torch, and that was my first apprenticeship. And then moved on to a couple other apprenticeships, decided to do it all on my own.
So you started with like the retail part of glass. Do you think that gave you a different perspective than other people, like knowing what the customers are interested in and kind of having a different perspective than most glass artists get, right?
I guess. I mean, as a whole, the public kind of tends to have very different opinions on glass. Like you'll have someone that wants, the biggest pipe that they can have, and then you have another person that says, that doesn't give them the smoking experience that they want. So, I mean, it does give you an insight, but it just shows you the variety of people that enjoy glass.
And do you still do like your other art too? Do you make time to like do graffiti and to draw, or do you find that all of your creative energy is kind of just funneled into glass now?
It varies. So like I'll go through, I guess you could call it binging of art. I'll spend probably a week not blowing glass, and then I'll just draw, I'll paint, and the illicit part of the art too. I don't do that as much, but it's still part of it, so you have to.
And when you started learning glass, were you just kind of doing like prep and production for the shop to resell, just kind of like getting everything set up, not really making your own designs?
Yeah, I mean, they also had a requirement for extra time, like extra learning time in the studio. So you had to work your 40 hours making their products, but then you also had an obligatory 4 hours on the weekend. So it was forced on you to try other things, but it was very niche. So like you were forced to try other things that were for the parts. And then getting too artistic with it, they really didn't like. I actually used to make pipes with a fake carb. Like they had a real carb on them, but then I'd do an indentation on the opposite side where it was just like adding texture to glass. And then you'd pick it up and you'd be like, which side's the carb?
Okay, so when you left that shop, did you, I don't know how you're set up now, but just kind of take us from there. Did you learn from other people? Did you kind of set up your own studio, or do you rent? Kind of take us along the line of like the last 14 years from that time.
Yeah. So after that, so I spent about almost 3 years at my first apprenticeship. And within that apprenticeship, I had a mentor. I had two mentors, Matt Z and Dave the Slave, who kind of took me under their wing and showed me a lot outside of the required, curriculum, I guess. They kind of started to open my eyes to the artistic part and to like the expanse of what glass could be. Whereas the part making, it was very, very fine tuned. It wasn't very social. Like you weren't a glass blower where you could go out and be like, hey, I make pipes, and they're like, oh well, who are you? And they're like, well, I work for this company that we just kind of make little $5 pipes. Not that you're not a glass blower, but you're not really considered like an artist. At least that's how they made it. They really tried to just keep it fine-tuned into the production. And then after I left,
manufacturing, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, from a business standpoint, it's right. Like you do have to make what is going to sell. Otherwise, you're not going to have a business to sell the things that you want to sell. And that's been something that I've carried pretty much my entire career. Like there's always production to rely on. You can always, make some spoons, and eventually someone's going to buy them. I mean, you can make a $10,000, chandelier or bong or whatever, and it's beautiful. It's amazing, or it can be. But then you have this price tag where not the artistic point of it is getting fine-tuned, but the market for it. So you have to have somebody that not only has a desire for that piece, but space for it, and some kind of reasonable
income or something.
Well, I mean, some kind of justification for owning it. Like, you buy a heady bong because, it inspires happiness, it makes you feel a certain way. And that, in my opinion, enhances your smoking experience. That I always say that the piece gets you 10 times higher.
And then after those 3 years, how you ended up moving on to something else?
Yeah, so I found another local shop. I was just trying to sell off some pieces that I had made, some, personal time pieces. And they wanted me to fill out an application. So I filled out I didn't even fill out the application. I just came back and dropped a resume. And when I did, they told me they weren't hiring. And I'm like, well, you guys told me to bring my resume. And they're like looking at it. I'm like walking out the door, and they're like, wait. You blow glass? And I'm like, yeah, that was like my whole point. Like I came in here with pipes, and like you told me to bring back a resume. And they're like, oh, well, we have a shop in Canyon City, which is about an hour and 20 minutes south of me, down in the valley. So I ended up working with them. His name was Pipes Pete, and I was with him for about 2.5 years, maybe about 2 years. Then
Hold on. Did you like up and move, or were you commuting, or were you like couch crashing, kind of like
Yeah,
winging it?
it was mostly couch crashing. So I would work 3 days for him doing his prep. What I would do is I would prep blanks for him to make pipes, bubblers. This was actually like right on the verge of rigs being made. Like this was when they were still either the titanium swing or the male attachment with the dome and the little quartz nail.
We've come
Like,
so far.
like it was actually a little nail. I don't have one anymore. I had until like last year. I had one of the original Puke and Beagle direct inject, one of the first domeless nails, where it still like sat in the male piece, but it had the like almost closed top. It just had like a little lip pulled out where you could drop the dab in, and it was amazing. Like it was the next level. You didn't have to have a dome. You didn't have to have a carb cap.
Okay, so after you were probably done commuting for like 2 years and you wanted to be home, what happened then?
So I actually got a real job. I started working at Home Depot part-time while I was blowing glass as well. Started renting a small garage where it used to be an auto repair shop. And I got in it really cheap. And I had two friends they were trying to learn. So they kind of helped with rent. They got all their own supplies. And then when they moved, they ended up moving to Oregon. I don't even think they blow glass anymore. We don't talk or anything, but they split, and I didn't really want to like pay for all that on my own. So I took a hiatus for about a year and a half and just did the real job thing, and it sucked. It was awful. The whole time I'm like trying to be a manager, and they then like it just hits me one day like I'm trying to make 13.50 an hour to break my back and like waste my life for like people that are going to replace me in a minute. Like the minute I fuck up, like they have 10 people in line that are ready to start, and then they got 100 people behind them, and then they got 100 people behind them, and it was just terrible. Like I couldn't do it anymore, and I started renting studio space at the Glass Grind here in Colorado Springs. Probably the best decision I ever made, and ended up getting fired because I couldn't make it to work on time because I was always blowing glass. And my boss is like, "Hey man, what's going on?" I'm like, "Sorry, dude, I was making this bong. I was in the middle of it, and I had this crack that I had to seal up." And he's like, "Well, that's a cool story, but I don't think you need to work here anymore."
So
So
did you like, you're like, all right, now I'm just gonna jump in and do glass full time?
yeah, that was kind of it. I mean, it's all I really knew. Like I was 18, and the apprenticeship that I had started when I was 18 in 2008, they it was full time, it was paid, so I made money that way. And I guess in my mind, like it didn't really make sense to not do that.
Did you have like a business plan in mind when you're doing it, or were you just blindly like, this is what I know how to do, and I'm just gonna just wing it and hope for the best?
That's pretty much how I live my life every day, just winging it. I'm like, I'm gonna make something cool and hope somebody buys it.
Do you feel like all your production history and all the prep work that you're doing through your apprenticeships, do you feel like that made you a different glass blower than the people that just kind of jump in and learn on their own and just kind of work through projects in a different manner?
Yeah, I mean, in ways it's inhibiting, and in ways it's been helpful. The production part of it, like I was saying, it's very niche. It's very like one note. You have to you have to make everything one way, and that just gets repetitive. So then it just kind of becomes job. Like you could just be working in a factory, putting together tables or, you know, lawn equipment or whatever. And I mean, basically it's the same job. You're just doing something a little bit more intricate. With how it can advance you, like the necessities in glass are more administered. So when you look at wall thickness, when you look at seals, when you look at, you know, bends in the glass, you can tell when somebody spent a lot of time focusing on that one thing, and then you can tell when somebody just like does it, like when someone's like, I want to bend this piece of glass. And you know, I'm not saying it's always terrible, but you know, sometimes it's not that great. But then, you know, that practice, that production, when you have something that necessitates that move, then it becomes a lot easier. So then it looks a lot nicer when you do get into the art.
So at this point, do you rent bench space or do you have a studio at your home?
I rent bench space and I work out of my friends' studios a lot. Usually that's just collabs. So we're both making money. We get, you know, small chunk to go back into gases. Most of them are using oxygen concentrator fill systems. So it's very minimal on that end. We're really just buying propane and then paying electricity to run the kilns and the oxygen concentrator. I do have a local studio, DBK Glass Creations, that I rent out of when I'm not with my friends. Like if I have big orders where I'm just doing production, or even if they have one of my friends from out of town renting there, like I'll go and hang out so that, you know, they don't have to move all their stuff to my buddy's house. And it makes it a lot easier to have all the options, having the public space, having my friends, and then we all just hang out and have fun and make money together.
How do you get those
We
orders?
make cool bombs. We don't always make money.
Yeah, that's why that was my next question. I'm like, okay, so where's this money coming from? Do you work with like other head shops still, or do you are you able to reach it with your Instagrams and with other people's social media reaches?
It's a pretty good mix. Social media has helped me reach more pipe shops. I still have a few local shops that support me really well. In Denver, Rigs for Us is one of my strong supporters. Here in Colorado Springs, I don't know, I guess they don't like me that much. I had a big falling out with two of the shops here. One of the owners of one shop, I was renting space in their public studio, and a bunch of my glass got smashed by the owner. So they don't buy from me anymore because I owe them money for rent and they owe me money for broken glass. So we can't find a middle ground, and there's nothing there. And then in this other studio, same thing. I was renting out of their space, and it just was a bad situation. He had very bad interactions with a lot of other artists, and he put on some pretty big shows that the artists didn't really benefit from.
I was kind of wondering, so are you more like extroverted? Because it seems like you're always surrounded with people. And I was wondering if you work really well that way, or if you're ever the kind of person that's like, don't talk to me, I need to fill this order. You know, like I'm so introverted that when I need to focus on something, I need like quiet and private. And I'm like, leave me alone. But you seem to be like up and around and surrounded by people all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just how I like my life. I like to blow glass with my friends. I mean, there are those times where I need to not be as social. I just need to make my stuff and not pay attention. Like I said, when I rent at the public studios, it's usually for my own production, unless like my friends are there. So that is that is a more private time, even though it is a public setting. Like everyone else is there to do their own work too. So it's not like I'm forcing myself to be away from people.
Do you find that you need to go through a certain kind of routine in order to get into the headspace of working? Or are you just one of those people that's like always ready to just go?
Oh man. So my friend Bait Creations out in Florida, he says that I am like the Energizer bunny, just always ready to go. But I do need quite a bit of coffee.
And do you ever find that you don't have inspiration at all?
Oh
Or
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of times. I mean, especially after like competitions or, big shows, big trade shows and stuff like that, with all the effort and stuff that goes into it prior, it definitely leaves a lot to be desired after. Like, if you compete in the games, then you're like, oh man, I went so hard, I made this piece, it's so cool. And then like if it sells, then that's awesome. Like you made it, and like people saw it happen, and then they bought it right away. And then if you come home with it, like you're like, man, I have this cool piece, but it's like always like staring at you. So then when you go back to like making your normal stuff, when you're doing like production or you're doing, stuff that isn't so extravagant, it leaves a lot to be desired. So then you kind of get left with like a feeling that you want to create more, but then, it it just draws so much energy building it that you don't have the energy after.
How do you kind of like recharge after something like that?
Just keep going. One time, Windstar, when she placed in one of the champs glass games, someone asked her what she was gonna do after, and she was like, well, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go to work, I'm gonna make fucking pipes, I'm gonna make bongs. Like nothing changes just because it's a competition, and that was very inspirational because she does great work and she works very hard, and then to see that somebody else goes through the same thing, like it makes it a lot easier.
okay, we already talked about this a little, but I want to know how. So I'm a scheduler and a list maker, but you just kind of like go with the flow, right? How do you decide what you're going to do that day? Do you like get into the shop and like kind of like see what you're feeling, or depending on if you have orders or if you're already in the middle of a project?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just what inspires me at the moment. When I work with my friends, like usually we'll just sit around, we'll smoke, we'll get high, and then we usually just start working, and then they'll hand me something and I'll hand them something, and we always end up with something cool. Like I guess sometimes like I'll have like something in my mind that I wanna do. And I mean, I guess that's harder because then you have this expectation in your mind where the piece has to look a certain way instead of like just getting in there like, yeah, I'm gonna throw some shit together. So
I was wondering how your other art influences your glass. Like, do you find that it kind of all bleeds over?
oh yeah, I mean, I definitely, so one of the first things that I wanted to do was write on glass, but I wasn't very good at it. The art from my pen to paper to glass in the flame didn't transfer very well. So I kind of avoided that for a long time. But I mean, a lot of my friends do it. I've done it a few times and I've had a lot more success with it. And it's it's just something that's hard. So you just keep practicing like that, like I said about production.
Oh yeah, and kind of bouncing back, but before we were talking about if you draw things out ahead of time, and you said that your friends don't really like it necessarily because it holds them to something that might not be achievable. But do you do that for yourself a little bit, or you don't really need to be communicating what you're trying to go for other people?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I draw them out. If it's something a little more complex, like where the function comes into play differently, like recyclers. I don't really do recyclers too much, so when I try to do them artistically, I do have to draw them out. Like my buddy, my buddy Geoff and I, we made a tentacle recycler. So like there's one big tentacle as the main can, and then little like offshoot tentacles that are like the uptakes, and then there's another tentacle that's the drain. Stuff like that has to be drawn to know which way you're going to bend the tentacle, because it's not just a tube anymore. It's something organic. Like it's a piece of nature, and it has to look a certain way, it has to react a certain way. So the more the more realistic, or the more that I want something to look right, I will draw stuff out.
How do you go about pricing your work?
I mean, that's kind of like asking a doctor why he's going to charge you $45,000 to change out your kidney. I mean, it only takes him, 4 hours to do the procedure, but how long did it take him to learn to do that procedure and to be good at it? So that's one of the big factors that I take into it. Like if a piece takes me an hour, it didn't only take me an hour, it took me an hour plus 14 years. Like, and I'm not going to charge you for the 14 years, but I will charge you for what I had to go through, and all the experience that had to happen to make the piece attainable. And then I also fight that with, what's affordable. I don't want to be completely out of your price range. Like I want to have something for everybody. So at that, I think pricing is very up in the air for me.
Do you ever have a hard time putting your work out there, like perhaps with other people's judgments on a piece, especially something that you take so much time to think of all the intricacies with?
No, you really got to stand behind your art. Like people are going to have their opinions no matter what, and you really just have to do what's going to make you happy, what's going to make your piece the way you want your piece to be, and not really taking into account what other people are going to think, because art is controversial. Like there's 90% of the world that is never going to understand your art from your point of view. So you have to accept that someone is going to like it. Someone, it's going to touch their heart, it's going to touch their mind, it's going to attach to them. And I mean, that's why I like art. Like I find stuff, and like I'll go to my local galleries. We do first Fridays during the summer and like spring and early fall, and they showcase local artists. They promote everybody, and I love that. Like I go in there and like I'll not only find inspiration from everything that's just around. I'll find artists that I like, and I'll find a piece of art that I feel like I have to take home with me.
And depression and anxiety are huge parts of Christina and I's lives. So we like to ask everyone if either one of those ever take a part of your life.
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it. Anxiety is probably my biggest drive to keep working. I don't know if it's an anxiety of not having something to do, or that I'm not fulfilling my creative outlet. But the anxiety definitely is a big motivator. Depression, I mean, I I just kind of deal with it. Like, not to say that no one ever really cared, but no one ever really cared that I was depressed. Like, from being in school, like, no one cared when I was having a bad day. When I got my first job, no one cared when I was having a bad day. When I got my first glass blowing apprenticeship, like, they didn't care that I was having a good day. Like, I don't know. It's always just been something I coped with. Compartmentalize it and then just move on with the day.
I think it's just like so reaffirming to hear that it's just like a part of all of us in some ways. And like you definitely didn't get like the attention and recognition. Like you're a human and you're allowed to feel good and bad. But it's reaffirming when you know that other people like do have those extreme up and downs too.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, again, like I feel like it's a big motivator for the art too. Like, it's definitely pulled me out of slumps, like getting up and actually getting up. So, like, getting out into the world, like, that's what graffiti did for me. Like, when no one cared and like no one wanted to like hang out, like, I still had something to do. And it wasn't something that I had to share with anybody. It wasn't something, I mean, I didn't, like, none of my friends really knew that I did it. Like, I would like draw and stuff like that, but they never went out like at night with me or anything. So it was just like my own private time. And I guess that was my big depression fighter.
Like a really good outlet.
I wouldn't say it's good, but
It could be worse. You
it
could
could.
be like self-harming, like there could be more. Yeah.
Well, I mean, of all the art forms, I gotta say graffiti is the most self-harming. Like, you're going to put yourself in situations that you really could have avoided by not doing it. I've seen a lot of homeless people. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I've actually watched accidents happen while I was painting, and it's crazy.
And if you were to give us what your definition of success is, do you have any idea?
When I get there, I will let you know. No, I mean, success is really what you make it. Success can be waking up in the morning, having a place to blow glass, and a place to go at the end of the day. I mean, it can even be less than that. It can be waking up and having a cup of coffee. I mean, I don't know if you bought a cup of coffee lately, but you got to be pretty successful to get one of those.
Seriously, and it probably won't taste as good as when I make it.
I don't know. Do you guys have Dutch Bros?
No,
Yeah.
no. You're in like a fancy city. We're over here in the boonies.
We live in the woods.
Well, get a petition going. Get you guys a Dutch Bros out there. It's great.
I also just wanted to state the obvious that you have met your definition of success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty successful. I never have a completely bad day anymore. Like, depression still affects me, but I have so much positive influence in my life. Like, my time out in Florida, I made so many friends. String Beans, Sharp Focus, MJ Melts, Trouble the Maker, Nitro, Sandals Glass. I mean, like, I could sit here for an hour naming all these people that like they just make my day better. And like it's nothing other than me having met them and knowing them. Like they're like my favorite people.
That sounds like success to me.
Yeah.
And then like all my friends here, like Matt Z, that's probably one of the people I hang out with the most. My buddy G off, like we'll make bongs and then we'll play video games until like 6 a.m. And then I'm like, all right, I gotta fall asleep somewhere.
Okay, so if you have like a conclusion, like do you have any words of wisdom or like something to pass off to folks?
I've kind of lived my life on this little mantra that I came up with. I don't know if I came up with it or what, but what I say when anyone is having a hard time, when things aren't looking up, everything's gonna work out. Things are gonna be just fine. Like you might struggle, you might have no goal in sight or no attainable goal in sight, but as long as you don't give up, like everything will work out.
Perfect.
Love that.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I hope you guys have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Connected in Glass. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more information on the artists we interview and for updates on the podcast.